season 19 draft.
We are.
And I'm joined by the GMs of Gridiron. That is Richard John and Richard Egan. So thank you both.
Thank you.
We're into the sort of terminal post-draft stages now, and we're concluding with the draft day interview. So thank you both, as I say, and I hope you don't mind if I now launch into about 10 questions about the Gridiron experience.
Sure.
So this fun fictional football experience commences with 1. The ninth year. It's the 9th year of live draft events. We started back in season 3. Did you think back when these first kicked off that there would in fact be 9 years of live drafting to come?
Broadly, yes. Possibly not in the form it ended up being. Gridiron 2, to which we often refer back, expanded by adding additional conferences to one league. What I think we wouldn't have anticipated back in season 3 was that we get this big multi-league event where people come from all over the world to be here. I mean, we had Gary Stevens here today from Australia, Ricky Beck from Denmark, and that's a fantastic thing. So we would never have anticipated that.
And 6 leagues drafting at the same time today, broadly steadily across the rounds.
Yeah.
A couple of little technical issues. But I suppose we're still welcoming new coaches to the game all the time, and every year we see new faces come up at the live drafts, and a few this time around as well. Is there anything you guys would like to talk me through in terms of what we can do to help people who are still getting into Gridiron for the first time, and who don't have that wealth of experience that is concentrated in the draft day room? So the mentor program, for example.
Okay, that's a good point. I think Conrad, let's start with some numbers. So we run 6 leagues, and that's approximately 200 people, and that excludes the college community, of course, who I think are now about 65. Most of the college play in the pro games, but not all. We lose round about 10 or 12 at the moment per season, which is actually a remarkably small proportion. But that's what we have to replace with new blood in order to keep the game full.
As we pointed out in the room, that's only about 5 or 6% turnover a year.
5 or 6% turnover. We talked about that. You're quite right this morning, and that's a very small number. But it is important that when people come in, they find that experience manageable, because as you intimate, the hurdle now for new coaches is quite high. The game's been going on a long time, a long time, and the game grows over time. So the hurdle for somebody coming in is quite big. You mentioned mentors, but before we talk about mentorship, let's just cover the things that we do. We provide some very simple PowerPoint presentations available to coaches, new coaches, on the rules screen. It's worth mentioning those because sometimes people jump to the rule book, and the rule book is a little bit,
it's a very substantial 200-page PDF document.
It's deep, that's right. Most people can't even afford to print it off, let alone spend all the time reading it. So it's much more, I think, we find as a reference manual than something you read to understand the game first off. So the PowerPoints are there. The community site is there. They're originally founded by Tim and now subsequently Phil. And you get all the coaches who are able to support a new person coming in, answering questions. And we've most recently put in the Jumpstart League, which gives new coaches a chance to come in and really find their way through the game without joining and picking up a team.
Let's have a sidebar then on the Jumpstart, because that is also relatively new. It's an idea that was actually brought in response to feedback that was coming through in the live drafts. The idea being that someone who's thinking about joining Gridiron can set themselves up a team in the Jumpstart, or join a team that has been created in the Jumpstart, do a bit of practice in setting game plans, see what it's like, see if they get the flow of the game, how it turns over from week to week, and decide if they want the full experience. So what's the feeling of how it's been gone so far?
I think we're about to find out, because coaches are now joining the major leagues, if you like, from the Jumpstart. We've just gone through the first time of a draft with somebody who came into the game from the Jumpstart here today. I don't think the proof of that pudding will be until we see. Sorry, my metaphors are getting a bit mixed there, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. So I think it's so far doing exactly what we want. We have yet to find out if achieved its other goal, which was to drive down attrition, such as there is on newly joining coaches.
Yes, and I think we will know in the next season or two, and I think that's probably the more tangible metric. I think the intangible evidence we have is all pointing in the right direction. The gentleman who was at the draft today was an example of that, because he talked about the fact he'd come from Jumpstart. We've never had that before. I think he also referenced the mentor program, of course, and was a living example of how important. For them. And
that's Graham Bates of the now Maryland Massive in the Big Sky, first successful Jumpstart recruit. He was here in Bristol for the draft.
Fantastic enthusiasm.
Yes. And then Jumpstart this time I think my recollection is Jumpstart contributed 8 of the 12 replacements, and I suspect next time it'll be the dominant proportion. And just for the avoidance of doubt, I've had this question before: is it mandatory that you participate in Jumpstart before coming into the game? It's not mandatory. It is possible not to, but we will typically prioritise somebody who is in Jumpstart over somebody who isn't. So in a sense, it's that way around, rather than you can't get in without it. But I think increasingly it'll become.
And I think at that point, thank you to you and the other coaches who set up Jumpstart teams for us. It created a bit of Jumpstart envy, because some coaches who didn't get a chance to do that, who saw it as a chance, but actually it was a great service to the game. It wasn't just a bit of fun. So thank you.
And hopefully those teams can continue to be used for years to come.
They will be
as they get reset. We talked a bit there earlier about attrition levels and trying to drive them down with the Jumpstart. Obviously we have various leagues drafting here today, different numbers of coaches attending from the different leagues. I'm sure part of that is because some are more international than others. Some leagues have a lot more coaches in the States, for example. But do you feel that the number of coaches from a league that come here to Bristol and participate in the draft, is that the main indicator of the health of that league community, or is it just independent?
No, because as we've expanded the game, some of the more youthful leagues, for want of a better word, have attracted more of an international user base, and that means it's harder for them to come. I think it's a fantastic testimony to the game, and some people do cross the Atlantic or across the world to come here, and it's testimony to the people in the game, not the game itself. They come here for the people. But I don't think, therefore, we can say that because there's a particularly high US contingent in League X, that it's ill health because it doesn't get a good turnout in the draft.
And to take the Delta example, I suppose, there was such enthusiasm that there were some early morning Americans tuning in via Skype during the draft as well today.
Which came as a bit of a surprise, I think, actually, to some of us who were presenting at the time, to find out that there was some applause occurring in Louisiana or whatever.
So, okay, a slightly more mechanical question then, for our sort of halfway point. Elite players from college. It's been a favourite recently because I suppose it's the most obvious tangible impact from college straight into the pros. Players graduate, they come in as elites, they're very desirable draft commodities. So do you think it's changed the coaching mentality? And by that I mean, are people overly focused on elites, and is that skewing rosters to become more extreme, so more stars and more weak players?
So I think that I'll take that one. I think, and I think the short answer, I think, is no, and that's because, Conrad, I think by implication you're suggesting that the mentality would be, if I recruit elite players, I am more likely to be successful, all other things being equal. And I think that is not proven. And like everything in the game, and Clive Palmer I always quote on this, because Clive's always quite, I think, eloquent on this point, that the game is about choices. And so if you choose an elite player level X, and all of the things being equal, you've got another player level Y, and the level Y is bigger, you choose elite. I don't believe the elite strategy in that sense is guaranteed success. And the evidence I have for that is the most successful coach in the game is David Russell, and the other successful coach, coincidentally with the first name of David, in the Atlantic. Both of those coaches I think, provide evidence for the contrary. Because if I ask the question to you, how many elite players does Dave Russell have in his squad?
Probably not many.
Have a guess.
Maybe one.
maybe one. Actually, none.
There you go.
And that's a little bit contrary, I think, to the view that may be going around that, and I think that is the answer.
Okay, so a little bit of a follow-on from that. We had some discussion again in the brainstorm session about parity, and again, parity connected to nuclear rebuilds. So this idea that people will try and dismantle their team such that they can gain a large number of draft picks and start again from scratch, trying to sort of ride the roller coaster of success and have peaks and troughs in how the team performs. We also mentioned that the problem with measures that are intended to create parity is that they also benefit the same people who are intentionally, launching onto a nuclear rebuild. Is there anything else we can do? I suppose is the open-ended question I put to you, to try and address the fact that people will intentionally lose effectively, by sabotaging their team in advance.
So let's build on the outcome. I thought for those who were not here today, this topic was, I suspect, the most intense one of the session this morning, and I thought we got a lot from it, and it's not the first time the topic has come up. And so I think, again, the short answer to your question, what are we going to do, or should we do anything? I think the answer is we don't know, but we will look at it again, and I think that was the conclusion. Just to catch the spirit of the conversation this morning, we first of all, we should be clear that the most successful coaches, again, are not the ones who boom and bust. So when you look at any measure, whether it be Super Bowl density or win-loss proportion, boom and bust coaches do not feature.
And we've seen that in the GFL, the Atlantic,
GFLA,
the Delta as well.
In fact, across the entire league. So this is not a 1 or 2 league phenomenon at all. You just don't see that. What this game is about, though, is choices. And I'm a little bit reticent in saying to people we are going to remove that choice or aggressively penalise that choice, because if somebody gains satisfaction from a boom and bust, just like somebody gets satisfaction from doing something else, I find it we need to be careful before we mitigate against it.
Yeah.
The evidence,
there are radically redesigned and rebuilt teams that have won bowls.
There are.
We're not saying that's wrong.
There are, but it's not a strategy for guaranteeing consistent success. One thing I would finish on is the point that people made in the draft, that it does create a level of unrealistic gameplay. And as you know, or people will know, that in college we deal with that by making the game system put at risk the tenure of the head coach if the head coach was to do boom and bust, and so they can get sacked. In the pro game you can't sack anybody. In the unrealistic case is that somebody does something which in the real pro game you couldn't. And we'll look at that. I haven't got, I don't think we've got any magic answers for this at the moment. We will look at it.
I think the college response is the response that you would do if you wanted good ridders. I think what we heard today very loudly was, it's not much fun playing a team you know you're going to beat because they're on a dive. Hear that loud and clear. What I don't think we want to do is, what we don't want to do, is to respond to that with disproportionate measures like restricting trades to 1 per team or something that spoils a huge tranche of the game over something that, yeah, it's not ideal, but is it breaking the game?
That's pretty well covered a lot of what we heard as well in the brainstorming session, and then expanded on it for the benefit of those listeners who are tuning in now. Something a little bit lighter, and college again. You've mentioned before that college is now becoming increasingly the focus of new developments, and you're still looking at ways to try and create additional linkage between college and the pro game. So any sneak previews for us in terms of ideas that might be creating more linkage between college and the pros?
So there's a few things. Let's go through some of the things that we do already, so we have put together not just the process of draft players moving from college to the pro game, but we've also introduced the scouting process where you can, as a pro coach, you can scout. That caused a little bit of excitement this morning because some of the head coaches hadn't found the link that allowed them to scout college players. That's certainly though there on the site. We are beginning to link the personality of the head coach. So we recognise that the head coach may be somebody who plays in the pro game and also in the college. And the first example of that is the slightly cosmetic link between those who are successful in the predictions contest, channeling that success in predictions in pro into a fame increment in college. And that's just a little link. We've got a few more ideas of that ilk, and it just represents the link between the individual as a head coach who happens to be participating in both.
And I think that there's still a little way to go in terms of coaches starting to feel more about themselves being just a coach in college rather than associated with their team in college, because the level of movement between teams in college hasn't been that great yet, and probably as it increases, coaches will get more into that frame of mind.
I think that's an important distinction in the game. One thing I wouldn't want people to take from the message about colleges where the emphasis of development may be at the moment, that pros therefore we're leaving that to wither on the vine.
Sure,
no, we're not. The volume of suggestions today, comments today from coaches that affect the pro rather than the college game was quite notable. We will not just let the pro game sit still. We keep developing this game all the time.
That is. And anybody who looks at the statement of intent number 19, which for me almost got as much interest as this beer is getting for me right at this moment, it is still quite a bit of pro development. And the ideas that we got, as to Richard's point this morning, were also illustrative of that we never lack ideas. I think we probably see more white space in college that we can develop than we do in pro.
Well, yeah, so it's a pretty good summary of where we stand on college. I suppose just a slight change of direction again, question-wise, and as we start to draw towards the close of this fine interview. The Gridiron website, obviously we all read it avidly. There are a variety of different coach articles that are produced, commentary, analysis, and other similar things. Are there any that you particularly enjoy taking a look at?
Oh,
other than the GM editorials, of course.
Oh, no, I mean, I absolutely loved Colin Dean and Paul's Empire Mock Draft. That's an example of the sort of thing I love. Chris Quantrill's stats articles.
They're very, very nicely presented, actually.
I know. There's a wealth of coach input to the game, which adds so much character to it. I'm doing a lot of people a disservice by not mentioning them. And to be honest, I'll tell you one thing I read avidly, it's the interviews. Particularly when the interview chains go up. That was an idea that we would never have anticipated when we introduced interviews, and something that came out of the coaching community. Brilliant idea. I don't know whose idea it was even.
Yeah, one of the best ways to get searching questions to Gridiron coaches is to have their peers ask those questions rather than people interview themselves.
I would only, I would build on that by probably saying that the additional element would be the community site. I do go into the community site, not all occasions, but I dip in, and the link to this draft was when on a couple of occasions in the rules discussions somebody said, in addition to this particular rules suggestion, can we go back and look at a particular thread in the community site because it talks about that, and that's a good reference point that I will typically go back and I very rarely we don't tend to intervene in the community site particularly, so we don't tend to go in and pass comment. Mostly, it's kind of happened, but mostly we don't. And the reason we don't is, or certainly I don't, is because actually that can stifle debate because the GM has said X, and therefore people say, well, they're not interested, and that stifles the debate that's happening. But people shouldn't misunderstand that. We do read it. I certainly read it.
But can I add a point there, which is that I do think sometimes people assume that if they posted something on that board, we've read it. Very often we haven't seen it reach its maturity. And so when it comes to this event, people are making suggestions, speak up, bring those things up that came from the boards.
Don't always assume that the forum posts have all been read, because there's a lot out there.
Yes,
And it's a good resource.
Yes.
Well, thank you both again, gentlemen. Little closer, if I may, which is, are we going to see our friend Bob, the Gridiron AI, again anytime soon? I noticed he was presenting today when the draft was about to start.
He was presenting today, but I was on the phone, so I asked him to step in at the last minute. Yes, we will definitely see him again.
With a bit of luck, he can take over.
Yeah, I think some people wanted the Pro Bowl team.
Yes, there's many things I'm sure he's better qualified to do than the current incumbents.
Well, all the best for season 19,
Pleasure.
and thank you and good luck.
Thank you.
Conrad.